My name's Jane Crawley. I manage arts and culture for the City of Melbourne, and I want to thank you very, very much for taking the time out and making the time to come along tonight and to contribute to this process. And to those of you who also participated last Wednesday at the Artists Forum that we ran, doubly thank you and very appreciative. I want to introduce you first of all to Councillor Rohan Leppert. Rohan is the chair of a council portfolio called Arts and Culture, and Rohan's really just wanting to say hello and give you a little bit of context around where this art strategy sits in the City of Melbourne. So please welcome Rohan Leppert.
Thanks, Jane, and thank you. Can I add my thanks as well to everyone who's come tonight? It should be an excellent evening. Let's start. I want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to elders past and present. Thank you, Jane, for the intro. I have the great fortune, I think, to be chair of the Arts and Culture portfolio on Melbourne City Council, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome you here tonight. This is, as Jane has said, going to be a very important discussion for our city. Tonight is really all about opening up conversations between you and the city. It's about important conversations about the arts in our city and the role of a capital city local government. It's quite a unique role, and it's something that we'll investigate more tonight. It's a very interesting question, I think. Our current art strategy comes to a close at the end of 2013, and the new art strategy will articulate how council will achieve its goal for a creative city through the arts. And we really want to hear your thoughts. So what does a bold and inspirational creative city look like? How should the City of Melbourne encourage arts and creativity? These are exactly the questions we want you to focus on this evening. We know that the city is currently doing lots of things right, and as a musician myself, I can't tell you how much joy comes from all of the things that the City of Melbourne sponsors that I get to visit on a regular basis, the variety, the sheer quantity of artistic projects which employ so many artists, inspire so many Melburnians and enrich our culture. But we also have a few challenges ahead of us. How do we make the most of Melbourne's strengths as a leader in the arts? And importantly, how do we know that government is working in tandem with the community and the expectations of our residents, our communities and our artists? How do we know that we're working to your expectations? These aren't insignificant questions. This year alone, we're investing about $14 million in the arts through arts grants, venues and facilities, studio spaces and offices, free public events, projects and programming, public art and many other projects and initiatives. Those $14 million go a long way. They work hard. We spend them very efficiently, and the decisions about what council supports and what council doesn't support is absolutely based in our current art strategy. So what will the next art strategy look like? Tonight's about your voices, your opinions, your thoughts and your ideas. So please can I encourage you all to think big, stay passionate and share your thoughts for a creative Melbourne. Thank you very much for giving us your time to share in this crucial conversation for the future of arts in Melbourne. The last thing I have to say is that we'd like you to continue this conversation even after tonight on the Participate Melbourne site and also through your social media channels. The hashtag is Melbourne Arts. Please use it. And have a fantastic evening. Thank you again very much.
Thanks, Rohan. Before we kick off, I wanted to give you a little bit of context for this art strategy, a bit of political and also sort of bureaucratic context. So for those of you who were participating last Wednesday, please bear with me, because I think it's actually important so that you're able to participate in this conversation. You've got a little bit of a sense about where this art strategy sits within the council. It's actually quite a significant thing that we have a portfolio. So if we just stop for a minute on the whole area of local government, all local governments are required to have what are called 4-year plans. It's a statutory requirement, so every council has one. And essentially they are basically spelling out the kind of vision and priorities for the term of that council. You know, like any level of government, that council is elected for 4 years. it has a certain set of priorities that it wants to sort of see happen in Melbourne. So the council plan is quite a critical document in terms of sort of framing those high-level aspirations, if you like, for this council for the City of Melbourne. We're quite fortunate in the sense that we have, in those 8 high-level goals, the second one is Creative City. So when Rohan's talking about Creative City, he is actually referring to a very high-level aspiration, if you like, of this particular council and of that council plan. And it's a good position to be in terms of where creativity and the arts is located politically within this local government. Some of you may have been involved in a process, I think about 5 years ago, called Future Melbourne. I'm not sure if anyone was, but it was actually the first time this council engaged in a kind of a mass engagement with its broader community around what council might be looking at over the next 10 years. And it was also the first time the council used online methodologies to engage with people. And I think it's really through that process significantly that we actually end up with a Creative City goal. So it's largely due to you, to the arts community, to the people who are passionate about the arts, who took part in that process, some 5 years ago, who really drove that creative agenda, and we see it still in place today. So I guess I'm letting you know that because the art strategy is very well situated within the council plan and within the politics of the council to have real meaning and have real effect. As Rohan said, the council has a significant commitment to the arts already. So in terms of support for the arts, not talking about libraries, not talking about events, just talking about the arts, there's $14.5 million a year committed to it. And that includes the staff resources as well as the programs. It doesn't include the infrastructure, which is up around sort of $87, $89 million. So there's a significant commitment to the arts. So what we have is we have a Creative City goal, if you like. We have that sort of aspiration firmly in place. We've got the $14.5 million, the operational budget, and we've got that sort of high-level aspiration. So what this strategy and why we're here wanting to talk with you tonight is what strategically are the priorities for the next 4 years. So the one thing I really want to stress is that the conversation is a genuine one. We want your ideas. You will be heard. All of the ideas will be heard, and they will impact into this strategy and really set the groundwork, if you like, for priorities around investment and activity over the next 4 years. So I just really wanted to sort of give you a little bit of that context. I will now shut up and hand over to Leslie Canold. Thank you so much, Leslie. Leslie Canold has very kindly agreed to be our host and facilitator this evening. We're in the really fortunate position of Leslie having been playing that role throughout this whole process, so she's been part of a whole lot of conversations, which has been great. Please make her welcome. Thanks, Leslie.
How's everyone doing tonight? It's fantastic that you have all come out here today, and we've got some terrific questions to talk about. Just so that you know a little bit about who I am, I wear a number of different hats, but the important one for tonight is that I am a creator. So I'm a novelist, and my book, The Book of Rachel, has been out here in Australia and is heading off to the United States now to be published. So I'm very, very interested and engaged in the City of Melbourne and what it does for the arts and within the context of all of Australia, as I know many of you are. So we've got a night where we're going to be fun and we're going to be productive. It's a night where really we're blue skying. We're really asking you in some ways to open your heart, to open your mind, to let the craziest of ideas out, to not think about being prudent or constrained or reasonable or rational. None of that is really what we're here asking you to do. We really want to ask some questions and get some answers about what this city could do for creators and around creativity. So we've got 3 questions we're going to be asking you, and I'll take you through them, and we've got some provocateurs to sort of get you thinking and get your juices flowing around some of those questions. The 3 questions are, what do we love about the arts in Melbourne? What does a bold, inspirational and creative city look like? And how should the City of Melbourne encourage arts and creativity? So I'll obviously ask those questions again. You'll hear them a lot through the night. But I just wanted to give you a sense of what we're going to be talking about. Tonight is really about opening ideas up, building on each other's ideas. The more the merrier. We're going to harvest all those ideas, and later on down the track there will be some processes by which they're deliberated on and some selections are made. But that's not about tonight. So tonight's about generating them. And there are lots of processes that, as you've heard, are sort of feeding into this process. But I do want to just make mention of the sincerity with which Jane is speaking to all of you about how important your views are. Because typically what happens with councils is that they generate through their own processes and their own procedures and with the people they've got on hand, they generate policy and then they put it out for all of us to have a look at, the public to have, a say, and that's a consultation. That is not what is going on here. So really what is happening here is that you are building the foundation stones of this strategy. The city wants to be a creative city, that's its aspiration. There is money, and literally the arts and culture branch is saying, tell us what to do. So you've got an enormous amount of power. You will be heard tonight. There are other opportunities. If you go away tonight and you think about more things you want to say, you can tweet them at the hashtag Melbourne Arts. You can put them on the Facebook page. There's a Participate Melbourne site where all of these questions are also being asked. You're welcome to go back on that site. You're welcome to invite other people to go on the site. There are some pop-ups where you might see people in the City of Melbourne wandering around with little clipboards asking people questions if you happen to see one of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to start on that first question. And I'm going to ask our two provocateurs to come up and start us off in our thinking about that first question. So the first question, to remind you, is what do you love about the arts in Melbourne? And I'd like to ask Tasneem Chopra to come up around and give us her talk. So Tasneem is a curator, a consultant and an activist with a strong leaning towards the arts. Tasneem has presented a very popular TEDx Melbourne, and she's curated the Melbourne component of Faith, Fashion, Fusion, an exhibition on now at Melbourne's Immigration Museum, which is celebrating Australian Muslims women's style and identity. So can you please give her a hand?
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you for having me here today. I'm excited about art. I'm excited about art because art to me is a few things, but primarily it's about telling stories. Stories start conversations. Conversations break down stereotypes. So I think there's a conduit and a passageway that we can explore further when we embrace our artistic culture. If you think about what each artistic expression is, whether it's a rooftop cafe or a basement gallery, whether it's the juxtaposition of ancient architecture and modern architecture, whether it's our laneways and our cafes, these are all ultimately someone's personal expression. And I love that we see somebody in something. A very real example of how ownership of space and how appropriation of space, when it's done authentically, is seen in the exhibition that's currently at the Immigration Museum, which I'm very close to, and that's the Faith, Fashion, Fusion exhibition. There are two key components, I think, that make art so successful in Melbourne, and that is first the physical space to realise an artistic expression, and secondly is the professional space to be allowed to manifest that art in a way that's not edited, diluted, or appropriated by the other. So Faith, Fashion, Fusion is an exhibition which I'm very excited about, which is promoting and showcasing Australian Muslim women's style and identity. It's an exhibition that retained a Muslim curator from Melbourne to interview other Muslim women from Melbourne about their experience of fashion in Melbourne and being a Muslim woman in Melbourne. Very authentic, owned, shared, explored, and now being celebrated. This is an example of how things can be done right and be successful. So I'm excited about these spaces that give professional space a chance to flourish. Too often we don't allow personal expression because we have our cultures, we have our voices, we have our images appropriated by others. And when this happens, what you get is a very diluted, perhaps even sanitised version of what culture would be best to look like as opposed to what it is meant to look like. This compromises art, this compromises identity, and this compromises the integrity of the message of what art is all about, which is personal expression. There's an immense gain when young people can look into our artistic spaces, be it buildings, poetry, or music, and see themselves reflected in a way that's honouring where they're from. We have diverse cultures and communities here. We have a myriad of languages and faiths just in the space of Melbourne alone. So when we provide platforms, be it museum spaces, be it galleries, be it festivals, we're not just being respectful of the diversity that is Melbourne's diversity, we're actually paying forward social change for generations to come. So yeah, be excited about art, because art tells stories, stories tell conversations, and conversations break down stereotypes. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, take the fire seat. So next I'd like to ask Alice to come up and speak to our question. Alice Pung is an award-winning Melbourne-born writer and editor whose works include Unpolished Gem, Growing Up Asian in Australia, and Her Father's Daughter. She is the current writer-in-residence at Janet Clark Hall, the University of Melbourne, on question 1.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. Tonight I'd like to talk briefly about why I love arts in Melbourne, and it's for this, it's because arts in Melbourne is inclusive, and it's inclusive of a diversity of art forms. I'm going to talk about 5 different examples of art forms that I've been involved with just in 1 year, to give you an example of how inclusive our art scene is. A couple of months ago, I gave a talk at the Wheeler Centre on the Australian Literature 101 series, which are a series of free talks to introduce an audience to Australian literature. And the book that I was allowed to pick was Ruth Park's Harp in the South. Generally, I get asked to talk about Asian Australian literature or cultural issues or multiculturalism, but I talked about Harp in the South because the other aspect of my writing is class, and so the Australian Literature 101 series is very inclusive in that it educates a larger audience about Australian literature. I was also involved in the Melbourne Writers' Festival. Now, when you think of writers' festivals, you think of eminent people coming to give talks, but there's also a little-known section which is quite large of the festival, which are the school sessions. So I did about almost 9 sessions at the immigration workshop, and students came from Melbourne, but some of them came as far away as country towns or Geelong or schools that otherwise would not have afforded to have a writer at their school. And the other thing that I did, which was quite recently but not this year, was participate in a Melbourne Conversations, and it was about the way we read the world. So Melbourne is the UNESCO City of Literature, but there are also people who read the world differently, people who are visually impaired, people who are dyslexic, people who came to literacy at an older age. So that was what the conversation was about. The other aspect of Melbourne arts that I've been involved with is I've had the great honour of being in the Malthouse Theatre's Artistic Council, along with my friend David Nguyen, who is a community theatre maker, and the Malthouse director Marion Potts is here tonight. I talked to her this afternoon because I was doing this, and she spoke of the theatre ecology of Melbourne and how Melbourne fosters creativity from the garage bands and living room art projects or play scripts that turn into a catalyst for productions such as plays in the Malthouse and the MTC. Melbourne is a city that allows for a crossover of art forms, dance, theatre and visual art. And finally, I'd like to talk about the inclusiveness of the Melbourne Theatre Company. 3 years ago, I was lucky enough to be under 30, and that was how I was introduced to theatre. And because Melbourne Theatre Company gives under 30s half-price tickets, I would have otherwise have not been involved in theatre at all. And so the Melbourne Conversations, the Australian Literature 101 series, they're absolutely free. The Melbourne Writers' Festival school sessions are very, very cheap for students to afford to come to. And the Malthouse Theatre is a buzzing hive of energy and new ideas. We've had Indigenous productions this year. We've had The Bloody Chamber, and we've had Lally Katz, who is quite a well-known playwright whose plays cross all forms. So she had a play called Stories I Want to Tell You in person at the Malthouse. She had a monthly article that was somewhat related to her play and the characters in it. And next year she'll be at the MTC with a play called Neighbourhood Watch. And all these three mediums are linked because we come from a thriving and inclusive arts culture. Thank you.
Thanks, Tasneem and Alice. Okay, so that was fabulous. So now we really want to hear from you. So what we've heard is a bit about Melbourne being what we love about the arts in Melbourne being the capacity to take ownership of space, professional space that's not edited. Alice was talking about inclusiveness and about the wonders of being under 30. And of course, the way early art, the way new artists can be nurtured and everyone can be involved. So what are your thoughts on that? Can we get... you want to build on those ideas, reactions to those ideas? What do you think? What do you love about the arts in Melbourne?
I'm just about to start my 76th journey around the sun. And I remember Ava Gardner saying when she was interviewed, what do you think about Melbourne? She said, well, this film is about the end of the world, and they picked the right location for it. And they said, but, you must admit it's a very well laid out city. And she said, yes, like anything that's dead, ought to be. Melbourne, of course, has come a long way since then. And now, of course, it's wonderful with the arts. There is one thing that I would love to see particularly inclusive, though, and that is that if you look around any theatre, you will see a great number of little old ladies with grey or white hair. We support the arts, always have. The arts don't make half-price tickets for us. I think that the fastest growing demographic, I know this, is people over 60. We have more centenarians alive than ever have been before, and I hope to be around for that. However, there is very little catering for all of us now, so many of us who are on pensions and fixed incomes, and we want to go to the theatre. Now, there's a lot we can go to in the visual arts, but in the performing arts, your concession tickets give $1 or $2 off a $100 ticket. There is no pensioners' rush, which there ought to be, like student rushes. There ought to be looking more at catering for the older audience, and there also ought to be looking more, and I know this is a Melbourne City Council thing, but Melbourne now is more than just this council area, and maybe in coordination with the state government. Your audience, I came here from Warburton. I paid to put up in a hotel last night so I could be here for this.
Fantastic.
Because the arts, to me, are my religion. I'm a born-again atheist. I was brought up by Catholic nuns in boarding schools, and all that ritual and stained glass, when I got to stop being brainwashed and thought for myself, I became an atheist, and the arts are my religion. I raised 2 children who are in the arts. They were founded, one of my daughters helped found the Workers' Theatre, Melbourne Workers' Theatre, and the Women's Circus. And then went on to manage people like Archie Broach and Ruby Hunter and Indigenous artists, taking them all over the world. And my other daughter produces, directs and creates an award-winning world series called Horse Talk TV. So the arts are very, very important, but I find it very difficult. When I live outside of Melbourne, I do use a computer, but an awful lot of us don't, of my age. That's why I raised that objection. I will never have a Facebook or be on that sort of stuff, right? I go Twitter. But also, I get emails, and I have everything that I can I subscribe to. Thank God for ANAM, that I can get to know the free concerts are on, and Melbourne University and Monash University, they're performing arts things that put on free shows that I come to. But when there is something going to be on, I get an email 24 or 48 hours ahead telling me when it's on.
So you need to know
I
earlier.
need to know at least a week ahead.
No worries.
All those people in the catchment area that are
Yeah.
outside Melbourne
Need to know earlier.
know a bit earlier.
I hear you. Thank you very much. So we need to know earlier. And what else? What do other people think? What do we love about the arts in Melbourne?
I think as a newcomer to Australia and to the art scene here, what I'm absolutely intrigued and fascinated by is the number of opportunities artists have to exhibit. And what I'm talking about are the number of competitions that are offered, the number of artist initiatives that are out there. Now, again, I'm not saying that it's all affordable, that everyone can apply, and it's highly, highly competitive, but I think the competition that you encourage us as artists to participate in is what I enjoy about.
And are you an artist?
I am.
What kind of art do you do?
I do abstract collage landscapes.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. Who else has an idea?
It's interesting that just listening this evening, what came to mind was the White Night event at the beginning of the year.
Gee, that's come up a lot during these consultations.
It's just amazing how we embrace the different, the new, the untried. To see every single age group, to see people with walking sticks, to see people in wheelchairs, to witness blind people, young people, old people. Every single demographic was walking together along the streets of Melbourne and the laneways, visualising and witnessing the amazing contrasts on the buildings, the different free events that were going on. Most of us really didn't find out about it until quite late, yet we just took in the moment and we were there as an entire community. And I don't think that there are very many cities in the world that can boast what Melbourne does.
Fantastic. So that's great. So we've got inclusive, affordable opportunities, and hearing early it's come up a couple of times now too, hasn't it? Who else?
I suppose just adding on to that, I've travelled a fair bit and been to a number of countries throughout the world, and one thing that I identify here in Melbourne is, I suppose, in many aspects, the acceptance of the arts by the community as a whole. There's obviously a lot of tourism here. Particularly what I observe, and I really enjoy observing it, is just walking around the streets, living in the inner city area, you do that a lot. And the buskers that come here from all over the world to busk in Melbourne, and the crowds that they get, and those crowds at the end of their show are actually supporting them with no hesitation. So for me, that just demonstrates the acceptance of the people in Melbourne, just going, wow, this is what Melbourne's all about. And they support the people that are making the effort to entertain us. A lot of other countries I go to, you don't see the buskers. Is that because the people don't support or recognise or acknowledge the wonderful talents that these people have got, or not? I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I observe that, and that's just something that I think also makes Melbourne what it is.
Yeah, the art is sort of everywhere, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so we'll take one more on this question, and then you'll certainly be getting a chance to contribute in other ways. We've got some people down here, some people back there.
My name's Sue Westwood from the Melbourne Athenaeum, just around the corner in Collins Street, and I think one of the things that I really like about and love about Melbourne is that there are not only the main stage performing arts events and visual arts events that occur, but there are also these small conversations that happen, like the Melbourne Conversations certainly picked up on what the Deakin Lectures were a few years ago, but there are these small organisations who organise talks on history, politics, sport, literature that happen after work for an hour or 2 hours that are free, that people can tap into very quickly and very easily. And I think that enriches the city's conversation as well.
So it's arts and culture, yeah? Okay, fantastic. Can we thank these two lovely ladies? And you guys can head down. So the second question is, what does a bold, inspirational and creative city look like? what does a bold, inspirational and creative city look like? And I'd like to ask, as a starting point, for Gideon Obarzanek to come up and talk to us about what his vision is of a bold, inspirational and creative city. Now, Gideon is a freelance choreographer and director. He founded the dance company Chunky Move in 1995 and was its artistic director until 2012. His works have been performed in many festivals and theatres around the world, which is an understatement. And most recently, Gideon was awarded a prestigious Creative Australia Fellowship to further his research. So please welcome Gideon.
Thank you, Leslie, and good evening, everyone. So I was thinking about sort of my own practice, and also, I guess in my work, the very many artists that I've worked with and writers and in various capacities. And I think for a bold, inspirational and creative city, one of the essential requirements is, and maybe it's a bit selfish, is actually practicing artists themselves and the creative industry. And really, what I think artists and people in the creative industries gravitate to, because actually the bulk of these people do not earn that much money, is affordability. And it's not a hugely sexy topic, but I just want to speak about it for a couple of minutes. I think affordable housing is very important for a creative city. I think affordable places to work is very important for a creative city. And I think affordable food, utilities is also very important. That alone is not enough. What that needs to be combined with is affordable, high-quality education and also access to cultural and artistic resources, probably meaning affordable as well. Things such as libraries, museums, galleries, theatres and concert halls. And in my travels with my work, if I think of cities that I think have worked quite well, I think of, ironically, a very bankrupt city such as Berlin, which actually is extremely affordable because it's got no money, and no one has any money, but it has these incredible cultural resources and education capacity for many people. But I don't think cities have to be bankrupt necessarily to be able to achieve that. And I also think a little bit about, and this is anecdotal, so like Pacific Northwest in the US and BC. So it's things like places like Vancouver, Seattle, Washington, Portland, Oregon, which are much smaller cities, but they are certainly not bankrupt, and they are able to, from what I can tell, being able to give great education, state-funded education, affordable education, and also good facilities and affordability. So what do I see in the creative city? I don't really know what a city looks like, but what the city would look like. But I certainly hope to hear a lot of different languages by a lot of different people on the streets, on the tram, in public spaces, by many people from around the world and in Australia who are both visiting, having their education here, and also practicing their artwork here in Melbourne. Thank you.
Thanks, Gideon. So those are some great ideas about galleries and theatres, and I didn't realise. So you were saying Berlin was bankrupt?
Yes, well, it was in I don't know if it's in the last year or two, maybe people know, but it has been bankrupt for most of the 2000s. Yeah.
Very affordable.
So there are benefits of having a bankrupt city. Interesting.
And New Orleans is also bankrupt.
Right.
And it's a very affordable and creative city.
Maybe that's one of our ideas. We need to go bankrupt.
I'm not suggesting bankruptcy.
Okay, can I get our second speaker to come up and speak about what does a bold, inspirational and creative city look like? And that is the wonderful Louise Adler. Louise Adler is the CEO of the University of Melbourne Publishing. She's the president of the Australian Publishers Association, a board member of the Melbourne Festival, deputy chancellor of Monash University, and if that wasn't enough, also the chair of the board of Methodist Ladies College. Please welcome Louise.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you to Jeffrey for initiating this discussion. So the question we've been asked to reflect on is, what does a bold and inspirational creative city look like? So here are some of my thoughts in no particular order of importance. A creative city is safe, but also not safe. A creative city, and I have to thank my colleague, the editor of Meanjin, Zora Sanders, for this idea. A creative city is open. It doesn't close down at 7 p.m. Maybe when you're her age, you want an open city, but I'd be happy 9 o'clock, 9:30. But anyway, that's a generational matter. But certainly open. And if we think of Melbourne and the CBD, and I hope the bureaucrats, all the well-meaning people at the Melbourne City Council don't take this amiss, you wouldn't call this a thriving and throbbing place after 7 o'clock at night. Forgive me. A creative city offers first-rate art and cultural institutions. It offers affordable art. As Alice said, under 30s, we need to nurture the next generation of artists and arts consumers by giving them access to culture. And I think about the pricing of tickets, and I think we are making sure that no one in the next generation will be either able to make art or actually go and see art being made. I think that's one of the key issues we've got, which is access and affordability. We need experimental arts organisations that are publicly subsidised to take risks. We have, in a creative city, a vibrant film and television production environment. And when I wrote all this, this list was coming to me, I was thinking, no, forgive me. I know I'm not allowed to do any buts, so I'm doing some no's instead. I think we have a way to go. Sneaky. Cutting-edge fashion. If a creative city has anything, it has cutting-edge fashion. It's home to a broad range of educational institutions, as Gideon discussed before. Universities are incubators of innovation, but those universities also have to make visible by their public engagement the dynamic engagement and relationship between what happens in universities and what happens with the research that they create in universities into the community and into industry. I have had the privilege of working with Monash University for the last 14 years. I'm dazzled by the kind of research and the impact that research has on my own and our everyday lives, from the seat belts, the kind of manufacturing and testing of seat belts, through to protection of children against child abuse, sexual abuse. It seems to me there's a myriad of fabulous work and research going on in universities that's never made public and never made visible to us, the general community that actually supports that research. I think we need to urge the universities to make that work public. It helps to create a creative city. A creative city also has urban design that encourages rather than discourages community. I think Federation Square is a perfect example. Melbourne, some of you are my age and know this, Melbourne was always a city in search of a meeting place. We tried again and again and failed to create the city centre, the plaza. But within days of Federation opening, it became our natural meeting place. I think that's really interesting to reflect upon. I don't know how it happened. I'm not an architect. But suddenly, you want to meet someone in town, you meet them at Fed Square. Cutting-edge architecture always creates debate, always creates a sense of community alive and engaged with the spaces we inhabit. And I think of the fabulous Story Hall, and many people might not agree with me, I think it's a dazzling building still, or I think of the debate we had with the goddamn shards at Federation Square. Sorry, goddamn, I know he'll strike me down. But however, that debate alone about one shard, two shards, one shard, two shards created a sense of a lively and dynamic and challenging city. A creative city needs to create the conditions for creativity, and I think we've mentioned it already, but the question of funding is the white elephant in the room. I think for people who are engaged in arts and culture and want to support it, if we don't yell and scream from the rooftops to say that the arts need public funding, we are missing our obligation. People who want to go to the arts, whether you're kind of, a venerable or you're Alice Pung, it seems to me really, really important for us to demand that the state funds culture. It cannot happen without it. I don't share the current view about crowdsourcing and how wonderful it is. I think that's like volunteer, like the rattling the tins at the traffic lights. That's all very well and good, but that doesn't get art made and that doesn't get it seen. So I think it's terribly important for us to do that. We know that the creative city needs those conditions for creativity and that the state can help us create the conditions. We can encourage clusters of activity. I think of Silicon Valley as such an obvious example. Clustering of technology and technology businesses created creativity, or Hollywood for the film industry. So what clusters do we have in Melbourne? I certainly think straight away, because I'm an addict, I think of the coffee clusters we have. If we have an example of a creative and innovative culture, it's certainly coffee would certainly be one idea that that we could think about, and how that percolates, forgive the pun, but how that percolates through the culture. We are obsessed with coffee. We know every new place that opens up. We know where a good coffee is. We have fierce arguments about it. On social media, we have apps that actually tell us if you're in Paran, you can get a great coffee here, and if you're in Northcote, you can get a great coffee there. And how that happens and how that creates a culture of innovation, and there is innovation in coffee, in the coffee culture, if you like, the coffee industry here. It's a really interesting example for those of us who want to think about it. Creativity is both an individual and collective activity, but connectivity is vital. Are we convinced that access is available to everyone, or is it still the domain of the rich, as this lady down here said at the beginning of this conversation? Not everybody has access to the digital environment. So I think that support for public digital infrastructure will do much to encourage and create physical and online community engagement. I will finish in one moment. Preparing for tonight, I read an essay by Charles Landry, who argued that great cities have contradictory elements. They offer places that are stimulating and vibrant, but are also places of calm and refuge. They offer a sense of possibility, but also the opportunity and the ability to close in on oneself. They offer the feeling of being at home and in the wider world. They acknowledge the values of heritage, and they celebrate the new and the fresh. So I think that we have to separate the preconditions for individual creativity and those for social creativity, because I don't think they're the same thing. I'm sure the people at the Melbourne City Council have looked at the British Council report recently on creative cities. They made a distinction between the view that creativity is an activity for special people of special talent in special places, in the studio, in the garret, for the boffin or the bohemian. They made a specific sort of difference in view, if you like, between those people and those people who can work in collaboration with others. If you want, and I'm quoting from the report, if you want more creativity, you need more special people in more special places, bigger and better cultural quarters, and bigger and better research parks. But, they finish, creativity doesn't always come in a flash from an individual. It comes from the recombination of two ideas to create a new one, new ideas that emerge from intense conversations between people. So I think about that, and I think about that proposition. I think yes and no, and I think about Alice Pung and the writing she does. She needs her time in the garret, but she also needs time, as she alluded to, spent in the world. But her writing begins in private. Sure, once the book's written and published, the connection to her readership is vital, via electronic media or print media or in person in a dazzling array of Meet the Author events. So the production, though, remains private, but the dissemination is highly visible and public. To finish, I would argue that public funding for the creative city is vital, but creativity can't be mandated. The state can enable the preconditions for innovation rather than inhibit it, but it will be us as citizens who work out how to live together creatively. Thank you.
Brilliant. So, if that didn't give you something to chew on, you're dead. The bit that I actually liked the best was about the coffee, because I don't know, have you heard about suspended coffees? So there's this great new program going on where you can go to a cafe, and if the cafe is participating in the suspended coffee program, you can purchase a coffee for someone which hangs in suspension until somebody who needs a coffee comes in. And I thought, that is so Melbourne. Like, only we would sort of think somebody needs a latte, and we've got to provide for them. But it turns out they're actually doing it in Sydney as well. But maybe we could have like suspended artistic creativity. So maybe there could be participating outlets where you could go and give a little bit of money, and then when enough was built up, you'd have like a scholarship or a grant for an artist. That's what it made me think of. What did it make you think of? Okay, so let's talk about it. Can we get those big Post-it notes to start flying around the room? And can we talk about what does the bold, inspirational and creative city look like? Can you react to what Gideon and Louise have said? Can you tell us your own ideas? Hands up, what have you got to say?
I'm just listening. There was mention back of the buskers in the city. Now, we are visitors from the country and we enjoy the buskers that operate now, but they are so dependent on people putting the money into their hats. And maybe the City Council can pick that up and invite these creative people to go on the streets knowing they're being supported and their art is being presented. So I'd be very much in favour of more of the buskers, and I find the City Council could pick up on that. The other thing that really interests me is giving free space. My son is in art and he finds it expensive to present his art. So maybe the City Council could think of some of the fabulous spaces that they've got that they could develop and allow the artists, picking up on your cheap space, you don't want to be paying thousands to galleries to present your work, but some space, there are spaces about where artists can present their work. The other thing that really excites me about Melbourne is the laneways. And I think these are some of those forums where the City Council might pick up and over a period of time ask artists, whether they be in theatre or music, dance, then they've got that space, they're being supported and bringing people into some very, very fabulous places to see these people perform. So I think we've got some spaces in Melbourne that are unique, but we can bring the people in to perform in them, and we will enjoy that. And it doesn't have to be during the day. It can be at night time for people after 9 o'clock if you wanted to travel. But yeah,
for the under 30s.
Yeah, okay, but thank you.
No, fantastic. So can we get that microphone to someone else? And can I just, is what you're thinking of, and it'd be interested to throw this out to you, Gideon, and to Louise, is the idea that you could actually ask people in Melbourne who just happen to have space, whether or not they could donate space, sort of almost like a suspended coffee, a suspended space that an artist could be creative in?
Well, I've been thinking a bit about this, and it's not just about the City of Melbourne having artist spaces and residences, which I think is great. It's not instead of. But I think as sort of corporate citizens, maybe in the City of Melbourne, I don't know if there's some kind of incentive for some of the large companies that have quite substantial buildings in the city to somehow have credits for having a resident artist or a resident studio or some kind of residency that is that they gain something from that. I think could be an interesting
because they do stuff like that all the time that makes them look good, you know, that they sponsor a team or whatever. Why couldn't they sponsor an artist?
But they do. I think public spaces have meant, I think that probably people from the Melbourne City Council could have confirmed this, but I'm sure that public space, public buildings of a certain, Docklands, for example, they were compelled to spend a certain proportion, a percentage of the build of the I don't know whether they're experts at the table here, but there was a proportion had to be spent on the making of public art.
Yeah, it's not just public space, but this is like spaces for artists to work in that companies can give over for some kind of value back to the city and gain something from that. It's a kind of a tax that's paid through in space in a way.
Yeah. It's fantastic.
Talking about this idea of what makes a bold and creative city, I think one of the things is that a city without government boundaries. I think, and City of Melbourne's not alone in being guilty of this, but I think our municipalities stick very rigidly to their borders and when it comes to how they support the arts. And the fact of the matter is that the people making arts and the people coming to the art in the City of Melbourne, most of them don't live in the City of Melbourne. And so there has to be an opportunity, and I think City of Melbourne as our capital can lead this across the municipalities of this state. The idea that, is there a way that we can work better so that the City of Hume is doing things with the City of Melbourne, the City of Knox is doing things with the City of Melbourne, so that art doesn't end when we get to Coburg. If we go further north, there's no art. When we get to Footscray, if we go further west, there's no art. When we get to Box Hill and go east, there's no art.
But can I ask you to react then, because I think what Louise was saying was in some ways, do we need that spread, but do we also need concentration so that you get people like Silicon Valley, you get Artistic Valley?
But how are we accessing these people? How are these councils working together? How are the people in the council in Ringwood working with the people in the council at the City of Melbourne to get those people here if we're going to have a hub, a Silicon Valley? Because this is my concern, is that I feel like we are... The way our funding brains work in this state is that it's very much like, if you hit this border, we don't support you because we're the City of Darebin and that's the City of Yarra, and never shall the twain meet.
So the councils can work together to create a hub if they
Exactly.
wanted to.
Whether it's a hub, but the councils can work together to actually do work between the two. Why can't we have something that happens in Melbourne that then goes out to the City of Hume?
Sure.
Just so that we're offering a little bit more, because I feel like the hub's an interesting idea, but we leave a lot of people behind if that's what we focus on. So
yeah.
I think the councils could probably work together a bit more effectively and get a bit better bang for their buck.
Thank you. Fantastic. And we've got, take one more question over here.
I'm a curator and I work in multidisciplinary fashion with performers, visual artists, authors, writers, and have contributed to Melbourne become a UNESCO City of Literature, but we're not a City of Literature.
What do you mean?
Melbourne pioneered creative spaces. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of people hidden away in various forms creating. There are no gallery spaces. If you want to book, if you can afford to, you need to book 12 to 18 months to 2 years in advance. So exhibition spaces are non-existent. When it comes to performance, if you have a performance, it could be contemporary dance, it could be musical. Try and hire a space from a council, $1,000 for a little space. So, question of cost.
Can we put it in positive terms? What does a bold, inspirational, creative city look like? It looks like a place where you can access space quickly, and people can access it no matter what they can afford.
For me, would look like. You said us to be outlandish, so I'm going to
be outlandish. Go.
I was coming here tonight on the tram and I looked at Hamer Hall and I kept thinking, why don't I warm up to Hamer Hall? To me, aesthetically, it looks like a donut. So I want a cathedral for the arts. I want something unique. I want an iconic building. There's a missing piece. It doesn't exist at the moment. A multifunctional cathedral for the arts. I'd like to see an experimental art foundation. They have a little one in Adelaide. Why can't we have one in Melbourne, which brings people from outside to experience?
You have ACCA, Australian Centre for Contemporary Art, has been doing that.
That's an exhibition space.
But has actually been bringing, international art here for years.
Yeah, the Experiment Art Foundation operates on a different basis. Sorry.
So you want a cathedral, and what would be in the cathedral?
A variety. I mean,
So it would be like a hub.
A hub.
Yeah.
Yes, a hub. But it's also visually aesthetically appealing. And last but not least, the City of Melbourne pioneered the Women's Peace Garden. I wonder how many people know here that we have a Women's Peace Garden that's been looked after by the City of Melbourne. And I don't know anyone who goes there, so...
So you'd like more people to know about it and to go.
So information, affordability, inclusiveness, all those things come to play.
Fantastic, thank you. Do you guys have a comment to make?
I'm very concerned. The idea of the busker, and I'm not an artist. I'm a facilitator, enabler, whatever, handmaiden to the creativity of others is how we describe ourselves in publishing. And I'm very concerned by the kind of idea that it's the busker and what that represents. I think we need to look after professional writers and artists and performers. I think they're the people who are seriously engaged in the business. People can, we've all got hobbies, we've all got interests, we're all, Sunday artists or Sunday writers or whatever, but I think it's really important for us to think hard about how we encourage writers and artists, cultural workers, if you want to call them that, to be professional about what they do. Very hard to do it. I think, if I remember rightly, the last statistics were that the average artist's salary in Australia is somewhere between $11,000 and $15,000 a year. That's not a living wage by anyone's stretch of imagination. So I think we need to think about what it means for us. The creative city needs professionalised artists who are given the possibility of making work.
I thought that would get some hands up. Okay, so there's real artists and then there's not such real artists. So does anybody have a response to that? Really? I thought there'd be a few. Jeff, hand somebody a microphone.
Hi, my name is Wilin, and I'm actually a busker. I'm a street performer. I play accordion in the laneways of Melbourne, and I believe that how you're talking about how only professionals should be nurtured and how only people who have a lot of money should be nurtured isn't right at all. Busking is great because it allows people to get on the street and to express themselves no matter what you do. You can sell your canvases, you can do performance art, you can do whatever you want. And I don't earn a lot of money from that. I only earn about $5,000 a year from that. And I believe that there should be a lot more kind of Sorry, I'm shaking from talking. I believe that we should nurture the people up-and-comers rather than professionals, because professional means that you just basically have a lot of money and good PR, and these people on the streets aren't being nurtured at all. We're just kind of being left to our own devices. So that's...
Okay, right. So we need to nurture the up-and-comings because the professionals are making lots of money. Who wants to say something to that? All right, that person's got the microphone.
I'm not necessarily addressing that point. I'm perhaps stepping sideways, but it was in relation to the comments about public art and a sense that, and public art is commissioned, established visual artists are commissioned to make public art. I'm interested in public art programs extending perhaps more into the performing arts so that we're animating public spaces with established performing artists who are otherwise carrying out, performances are mainly inside. And I think that the idea that we might explore public art as performance allows for some quite exciting ways of thinking about public spaces, perhaps incorporating business buy-in by some work that I saw years ago where people performed in domes within the city, and some of those were in public buildings, some of them were in companies, beautiful private offices. So I think we've got fabulous spaces in Melbourne, and I think that there is scope for performance to be seen as a form of public art as well.
Terrific. So our last question is, how should the City of Melbourne encourage arts and creativity? That's our third question. And to help us explore that, we've got to start Ash Keating. So Ash is a visual artist since 2004. He has been exhibiting extensively in galleries and also undertaken a diverse range of arts projects in the public realm. Ash has worked throughout Australia and also internationally. In 2012, he created the 3-channel video artwork West Park Proposition, which will be exhibited as part of NGV's Melbourne Now opening this week. Welcome to Ash.
Thanks. I've been quite busy the last week, and I only just started preparing this afternoon, and I prepared for the last question, actually. So I haven't got a written response to the last question or this one, but I guess in terms of what I see a creative and inspirational city, I certainly see it as Melbourne. And I'm born in Melbourne. I'm born and I lived 30 minutes east in Blackburn, and in the early 90s I used to come into Melbourne and see the potential of the city that I was raised in, and then as I started sort of gathering momentum with my personal interest and identity of art and painting in the studio, but also on the walls in the suburbs, I started seeing there more potential for audience interaction with my work on walls in the city. But essentially, I saw, I guess, that kind of that need to travel into the city, and base myself in the city, which I've done sort of since the early 2000s. But something that we've been talking about as a group here in terms of answering and responding to this question or provoking this question is the fact that through that time over the last sort of 10, 15 years while I've been living in this in Fitzroy and currently in North Melbourne and East Melbourne, trying to just keep on the pulse and in the city, as an artist should, is that those rents keep rising and rising and rising, and on top of the fact that I, like most artists, are sort of living check to check, fee to fee, and trying to act as an artist 24/7, because that's sort of the role as an administrator / artist these days. There is sort of it's hard, I guess, to balance all these types of things and stay on the pulse, and then stay on the pulse of what everyone else is doing outside of your own practice. So I think that for young people, like, for instance, when I was 24, the Mockridge fountain out on the side here near Swanson Street and Collins was boarded up with board during the drought, and I went up there and I saw it for a couple of months as an untapped space, a great space for maybe some art to be on. So I just took it upon myself to utilise that space, and I did an uncommissioned splash-based painting on that wall. And then I went back week after week, and I laid it. And then the City of Melbourne actually took this on board, and they actually cleaned some of the pavement, and they left it stay for 3 months. And for me, that was important. It was just important that I had to paint at that point, and I had to use that space at that point. And I've been speaking to friends and artists that are that age now, and they have projects that they want to get up and running now, and I know the need, I guess the feeling to want to make a project now, make a project that'll be presented within a couple of months. And I think that if the City of Melbourne can do anything, it can facilitate people, artists in their 20s that want to make art now, and can sort of facilitate these sort of short-term projects in the city, I guess, you know. But in respect to that as well, I guess, what we were talking about with affordability, I mean, that is a big issue. And as Gideon said, it's only going to become a bigger issue as this city becomes wealthier and wealthier, because, you know, sooner or later I'm not going to be living in Fitzroy. I'm going to be living in Coburg and beyond there. And that's where the hub of all of our creators are going to be living soon, if that kind of thing isn't considered. Yeah. Anyway, I'll leave it.
Thanks, Ash. So I love that story about the City of Melbourne coming in and actually supporting what you were doing. That's fantastic, and that's exactly answering the question: how should the City of Melbourne be encouraging arts and creativity? Which is going out and talent spotting, and then supporting what's there. So that's fantastic. So let's now hear from Deborah. Deborah Cheetham is the performing artist, head of the Wilin Centre for Indigenous Arts and Cultural Development, the VCA and MCM at the University of Melbourne. She's a Yorta soprano, composer and academic. Deborah Cheetham has established her place as an artist in great demand. Since her international debut in 1997, Deborah has performed in the theatre and concert halls of Europe, the United States, the United Kingdom, New Zealand and Australia. Can you please welcome Deborah?
Thank you, Leslie. And, it's such an incredible opportunity to be in the room with so many colleagues, so many other creatives. This is what Melbourne 10 years from now looks like. It's opportunities like this that are regular, where we come together and we shape what the future is. We build on some incredible achievements in the arts, and we have affordability. We have artists who can choose to live closer and closer into the city, whether it's in a vertical environment or some other way. We have institutions like the Victorian College of the Arts that have regained their independence, and so that they are able to be free from the constraints of the kind of pressures of funding that the universities, it's just a necessary process, I guess, and that we can harness the potential of the generations who are there in our schools right now, who are longing for arts education, and it's being eked out to them little bit by little bit. You know, when I could spare time from my pursuits as a busker on the streets of the southern suburbs of Sydney, developing my, I guess, professional persona of the future, I would go to the opera 3 times a week. I would have change from $15. The kind of affordability, I guess it was the 80s and it was an extravagant time, but it formed the person, the artist that I am now, because I was able to immerse myself in what became my religion. I was able to see all of the great artists, hear all of the great artists and learn from them. You know, when I made Melbourne my artistic home 7 years ago now, I'm looking at my watch, not that I've got a watch that tells me it was 7 years, but I just don't know what 3 minutes is, but I'm really determined to try tonight. When I made Melbourne my artistic home 7 years ago, I had come from Sydney where, you know, the outward-looking Sydney, the international Sydney, the big end of town Sydney, but Melbourne just felt like home as an artist. There was so much connectedness here. And maybe the accusation that is levelled unkindly at times of parochialism is actually a great strength, of being able to look inward as well as outward, but looking in and understanding yourself. And I found a community here, and I found an opportunity to create here that I don't believe I could have found in Sydney. Oh, I'd done other things and my whole career had been built there. But the kind of things I've been able to achieve here are because of this city. Or more particularly because this city sits on land that has always been creative. For Aboriginal Australians, the arts are not an optional extra. They're not the elective you take in Year 7 and drop in Year 10 in favour of the serious subjects. They are essential to knowing your world and giving meaning to everything in it. And I know I'm preaching to the choir tonight, but I'll leave you with this thought that there's a way of looking at how essential the arts is, and connecting with Aboriginal community will give you a greater sense of that your very existence is dependent upon the arts, that if you don't know your song, then you don't know how to get from A to B and you don't know how to survive. It is a way of knowing for Aboriginal people, so I encourage you to take up the Aboriginal lens and view the arts and this place, this land of the Wurundjeri people who've poured their knowledge through their songs and their dance, their visual art into this land, layer upon layer upon layer. It is still there. It is not lost. And to me, it's not even faded in any way. It's there to be drawn upon. But I would level one sort of caution with that Indigenous lens. Make sure you're looking through the right end. Because it, for some people, is so distant and so remote, and yet it's not. It's right here, and there's an incredible energy to draw on. I draw on it every single day, and I thank the Wurundjeri and the Bunurong for the welcome that I've received to this city and beyond, and I pay respects to them and my elders, the Yorta Yorta people. To my colleagues who've all joined in the conversation this evening, thank you for the inspiration. I abandoned much of what I was going to say because I wanted to be fueled by what you all had to say, and I see a Melbourne in 10 years' time that has this kind of occasion where maybe we're even patting ourselves on the back for shaping the affordability and all the other things we've spoken about tonight, the inclusiveness, and we've built on this great tradition of creativity that's been here for some 50,000 years. Thank you.
So affordability, accessibility. I love this idea too about art being an expression of your identity. It's almost like you were saying, you know, if you don't know, if you're not expressing art, if you're not doing art, you don't even know who you are. You don't even know where you're going. So those are all beautiful ideas. So what do you think of them? How can we build on them? How do you think the City of Melbourne should encourage arts and creativity? Let's talk about it together for about 5 minutes.
I have sort of one thought, sort of stemming from what Ash was saying. He was talking about... Sorry, sir. Thank you. He was talking about the idea that artists in their 20s should be supported, you know, very predominantly, I guess. A lot of people like myself didn't come into art practice until my 30s. So I don't see a lot of opportunity. There are a lot of emerging artist opportunities for people under 30, but not so many for over 30-year-olds. And I'd like that to be acknowledged.
I didn't start writing fiction until I was in my 40s, so I actually agree with that as well. Who's got the next microphone?
It seems to me this evening that everybody's spoken actually about culture, not necessarily the arts. And to me, that's what's really special about Melbourne, and maybe a really bold, and I know that it's been said in the past, but it is that Melbourne is the cultural capital, and it's a cultural capital because of its diversity of cultural expressions. And to me, that's what's really special about Melbourne, and we shouldn't take that for granted. There are a lot of places in the world where you are not free or have a right to have freedom of cultural expression. And Melbourne facilitates that and enables people to access that and express that, and that's a really important and different thing for Melbourne. So, my thing is that should we be talking about an art strategy? Should we be talking about a cultural strategy? And Melbourne is the cultural capital.
Arts or culture. Deborah, does that ring true for you?
No, I don't think they're mutually exclusive, those ideas. For my personal use of the word culture is interchangeable with knowledge, and the arts is the way in which we experience that and know and give meaning to. I think that I've just used it I've interchanged. I haven't meant not to speak about the arts. I didn't want to talk about my own practice necessarily. I think in this room it's well enough known. But most definitely those opportunities to engage with artists, the accessibility. I think of a space like The Edge, that was BMW Edge at Federation Square. What a great space, and the way that that's opened up to the public on a daily basis, and the kind of opportunities they've opened up to arts organisations like the Choir of Hope and Inspiration, for instance. You can go and see that choir rehearse there every week. I think more spaces like that, where the general public, whoever they are, where people from the state of Victoria, and I broaden it because I think the great cities have a responsibility to the entire state. Sorry, City of Melbourne, but I do think you have the large responsibility there. We'll have more spaces, let's say, if we're going with the positive view of what 10 years down the track would be, or even 1 year. More spaces like that where Victorians and international guests as well can witness the process of art making, whatever that is.
So I just want to summarise, and really I'm going to end up missing some things out, and of course I haven't been privy to your table conversations, but I'm just going to summarise some of the things that have come up tonight. So I think we've had a bit of a theme that art is for everyone, and art should be everywhere. I think we've had a bit of a theme around artists and how they need to live and work in an affordable city or have some sort of support from the City of Melbourne, the corporate sector, in order to make that happen. And that artists of all ages and backgrounds need to be enabled to work and to patronise the arts. I think that's definitely some of the stuff that's come through, and I'm sure there's much more that's going to be in those boxes and on those sheets. So we really, really thank you for putting in all that hard work. So where are we going from here? This is definitely the beginning and not the end of the conversation. As we've talked about, there's lots of different feed-in points that are going to be coming in, and then there's this really innovative process that's going to be happening with the Citizens' Assembly. So if you would like to participate in the Citizens' Assembly, which is going to be 50 people, they're going to come from all ages, backgrounds, postcodes, and they're going to come together on one single day for, I think, around 5 hours. Is that right? 5 hours to look at some of this stuff and to start deliberating on it, to start sifting it, to start making sense of it, pulling together common themes, starting to do a bit of sorting. So you might want to keep participating. That's a fantastic way to do it. If you are interested, you can fill out an expression of interest online at the Participate Melbourne site. And of course, there again, there's an opportunity for you to keep adding in your thoughts. Just because you've been here tonight doesn't mean you can't add your thoughts online. So keep being part of the process. And that's pretty much the end of it for me. So I thank you very much for being such a fantastic and incredibly industrious audience. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Leslie. I just really wanted to take the opportunity to thank our speaker provocateurs. We very much appreciated the fact that you're busy, that you made the time to consider those questions and to contribute in the way that you did tonight. So can you please join me in thanking Tasneem Chopra, Alice Pung, Gideon Obarzanek, Louise Adler, Deborah Cheetham and Ash Keating. Thank you so much. Please also could I thank Leslie Cannell. She's been playing this role across a number of forums and helping us with everything. Thank you so much, Leslie. And most of all, I want to thank all of you. We appreciate very seriously the fact that you've taken the time out to be here tonight, the fact that you've engaged with the process, the fact that you've been generous with your ideas. I hope you haven't held back in that and you've been able to have dialogue, and we commit to hearing everything. So thank you for your generosity. That's it.